Hey everybody, thanks for tuning into this video. I'm going to go right out of the gate with it. So this is the second video of a 3-part video series from day 1 all the way to K04. So this is your guide to be able to get there and learn how to maintain your car along the way, as long as kind of stepping up the stairs in a way that will prepare you long term for K04 and save you a lot of money. If you haven't seen the first video yet, I'm going to put it up right here for you. It is day 1 maintenance to your first mods. So if you're new to these cars and you don't really know where to start with your maintenance, go check that out. Some very basic essentials that you should be able to knock out yourself, or go to your local shop and have them take care of it. And it'll save you a headache down the road when you're actually getting your first tune. So go knock that out and then come back to this video. All right, so we're gonna be talking about your first stage 1 flash. Stage 1. Just because I'm going to put it in quotations, just because each company has different requirements and you're kind of going to see why later. But right now is the time to be doing the research on what company you want to stick with long term, all the way up to K04. Even if you're slightly considering it, it's going to save you a lot of money down the road. Basically, I'm going to use this as an example with completely randomized numbers. These aren't accurate at all. But say a company's stage 1 file is $300, their stage 2 file is $500, and then their K04 file is $700. Basically, when you move up the chain, you don't have to pay the big ticket item each way. You pay the difference between the two. So 300 to 500 is gonna be 200. 500 to 700 is gonna be another 200. So basically, you're gonna be saving yourself a lot of money if you just stick with one company. So kind of figure out what brand you wanna stay with, because you're gonna get the most power out of it. Look around and see what other people are using. I'm going to be using Geoc as an example in this video, just because I've had their stage 1 plus tune and now their K04 tune, and I love both of them. They were great. But I'm also going to be mentioning Motoza a couple times in this video, just because it is pretty popular in the community and a lot of people seem to be really happy with it. And honestly, I'd love to ride in one of their cars, but I don't know anybody around me that has it. So basically, as you can see right here, here's Geoc's stage 1 plus requirements. They require a high pressure fuel pump as well as a front mount intercooler. So basically, as I just said, Geoc stage 1 plus tune is an intercooler and a high pressure fuel pump. However, this could be another company's stage 2 file. This is where it kind of varies between companies on what their requirements are and what to look out for. So that's why it's important to do your research and figure out what brand you want to go with. Here's Motoza, and this is their plug and play stage 1 file. As I mentioned earlier, it's just plug it in and it works. They do require a new diverter valve, which is something I would recommend anyways along the maintenance, as I recommended in the last video actually. So before we get into any of the recommended hardware or performance modifications that you need to buy, I'm going to be going over a quick maintenance checklist with you guys right now. I'm not going to put up a bunch of stuff, but this is just a mental note. How's the PCV system? Are there any major oil leaks that you need to be taken care of? Valve cover gasket in good shape? Is the car clear of any check engine lights? Because you don't want to upload a new tune to the car with any codes, just because it could cause even more issues, and that's not a good time. Are there any other mechanical issues with the car that need to be taken care of? Get those taken care of ASAP. And do you have a new fuel filter in the car? This one's kind of small, but it's really cheap and easy to replace, so might as well do it if you haven't done it yet. All right, so now we're gonna get into your recommended hardware for your first stage 1 plus or stage 1 file. And again, I'm gonna be using Geoc. I'm gonna keep saying I'm gonna be using Geoc just because I'm gonna use that stepping stone. Again, have your research ready on depending on what tuning company you wanna go with, but either way, all these parts that I'm gonna be referring to right now are going to be required for your K04 down the road. So either way, write these down or just come back to this video. So the first thing you're going to look at is your front mount intercooler. As you can see right here, here's the CTS Turbo front mount intercooler. You can get it off Euro Tuning or directly through CTS Turbo's website. There's a lot of deals that usually go around the holidays, so usually that's a good time to pick one up. Or if you got a lot more money to spend and want something a lot nicer and don't want to cut your front bumper, then get the Evolution Raceworks one. This is the one that I actually have, and here it is listed right here. It's gonna be a lot more expensive. However, I've noticed that the fitment is phenomenal on it. Either one that you're gonna buy or any front mount intercooler, you're gonna have to cut your crash bar or remove it entirely. I highly recommend just cutting your crash bar, because you're gonna lose the bumper hangers on your crash bar and your bumper is gonna sag a little bit. But here's a picture of what mine looks like. I'm gonna throw it up on the screen so you can get an idea of what the cuts look like. You can go to the junkyard and pull a crash bar off of another B7 if you don't want to cut yours, or just have a backup ready in case you don't want to use it down the road. So the next thing you want to pick up is your high pressure fuel pump. And a lot of people that get into these cars kind of oversee this or think they need to buy the entire system itself as an upgraded unit. However, if yours is in good condition, you can actually just buy the internals themselves and then just upgrade your stock fuel pump so that runs into a high pressure fuel pump. It's a lot cheaper. I think all the brands are relatively same in price and performance, but I'm gonna throw up the Autotech one on the screen just because that's the one I run on my car and I absolutely love it, and it was really easy to install. So the next thing you wanna get is the newest revision diverter valve, and I think it's version D. I'm gonna throw it up on the screen here. As I mentioned earlier, Motozaw requires it that you throw a new one on with your car if you don't already have one, but I highly recommend it if you do it with the Geoc as well, or any tuning company in general, just because you can get some boost codes after a tune, because you are going to be spiking up that boost level quite a bit, and it could cause some issues that you don't even know you had yet, or it could basically cause it. So start fresh. But if you already have the newest revision diverter valve, or if you have an older one and want to upgrade the current one that you have, kind of went in circles, but basically you can get the Go Fast Fits DV Plus, which is an add-on attachment that will replace the piston system on your diverter valve to a faster responding one, and will eliminate any leaks. I put it on my car not too long ago, and I actually liked it a lot because the K04 tune on my car was really aggressive and the car kind of jerked a lot in the lower RPMs. However, once I threw this on, shifting gears and accelerating was a lot smoother when you're just trying to do city driving. Again, this is completely optional. You don't need to get this, but it's a fun add-on to have just because it's only like 120 bucks. I'll be posting a video soon on my install on it. I want to give them a fair review just because my car has been down and I installed it just before I had to kind of park it for a bit. So stay tuned for that. The next thing I mentioned actually in the last video is a test pipe. You can actually pick one up here off CTS Turbo's website. But just fair warning, if you throw this on your car, you'll most likely get a check engine light unless you throw on one of those secondary O2 spacers. And you won't pass smog with this on, so just a fair warning. But if you do want to pass smog, you might get a little bit of pushback for it, is a high flow cat. It's going to be a lot more expensive. And I'm going to throw up right here is the 034 Motorsports high flow cat. This is a great option as well, and I like all their products. Go check them out. And then the last thing you should be checking out before you get your flash is a new air filter. I use the cone filter Spectra, I think it's called, from O'Reilly's. That's gonna be like a hot air intake. I wouldn't recommend doing that if you live in a warm climate. This is kind of a winter only thing. It's kind of laughable, but it does make a huge difference. Your air temps are gonna be really high if you run this without any type of heat shielding or heat protection, but it makes the cool sounds. So if you want something fun just for temporarily and then throw back in your OEM airbox, go do that, because that's usually what I do. So now you bought all the required hardware for your levels of tuning. You basically set yourself up for success for when you hit the K04 mark. You bought all the quality parts, you're caught up on maintenance, you're basically ready to go. All you need is a turbo, injectors, and the tune, and you're set. So now we're going to transition to a part of the video in pre-preparation for the third video, which is the K04 install. I'm going to give out this checklist in advance so that way you guys are ready, if you guys are following this video series, to be able to hit the third mark and you have all your eggs in a basket, you're ready to go, you're not missing any extra tools or hardware. So these are the DIY items that I needed when I did my K04 as I did it myself. These are some basic things that you could buy at Napa, AutoZone. You're gonna need everything here because I ran into it, and I guarantee you're gonna run into it as well. Just go buy it all and you'll be happy you did. So the first thing you're gonna wanna get is some protective glasses. This is usually often overlooked, but I highly recommend picking up a pair. I was working underneath my car and it kept getting stuff in my eye. It was really, really annoying, but they're really cheap. Pick one up if you don't have one already. The next thing you want to get are some pick tools. So that way, if you're doing the carbon cleaning yourself, or you don't own a blaster or any sort, that way you can kind of get in there and pick out all the carbon. You're actually going to need 3 to 4 cans of brake cleaner for this. Essentially what you do and I'll go over it again in the next video. You turn the crank until all the valves are closed. You're going to let all the brake cleaner soak in the valves overnight, and then you're going to pick at it with the picks. This takes a long time. Don't think this is going to be a simple process, but that's essentially how you DIY it yourself. Along this process, you're going to need some masking tape to close out the intake ports so that we don't get any gunk or brake cleaner in there when you're actually cleaning out all that carbon. It's really important to mask all that stuff off, as well as the intake port that is open. You don't want any of that gunk falling into the intake port or any other debris while you're working on the car, because your intake manifold is going to be off for quite some time while you're doing this. The next thing you want to get are some shop rags. I use my shop rags to actually soak up some of the brake cleaner and just keep cycling it through to get out the top layers of gunk for the carbon cleaning, and then also pick out some of the other gunk while I was working in there. It was really helpful to have that. You're gonna want a couple rolls of that. You might burn through like 4 or 5, but they're relatively cheap, so go grab some. The other thing you can get at Costco is a pack of microfiber rags if you don't have some. These are gonna get dirty. You'll most likely throw them away after this, but it's nice to have a big stack of them so that way you can just toss them whenever you're done. You can get a pack of 30 for $15 at Costco. They're yellow. They're relatively cheap. Let's go pick some of those up. And you can actually use these in the cleaning process, which I'll talk about later. Also, another thing you can get at Costco are a pack of 3 gloves. I highly recommend wearing gloves in this process because your hands are gonna get all gunked up and you're gonna be working with brake cleaner and possibly some other chemicals along the way, which could damage your hands. And your girlfriend will be happy too that you wore gloves. So pick up a set of gloves. You can do rubber gloves if you want to, but I like to wear the nice leather gloves or pleather for this just because it saved me, and my hands were thankful I did as well. Another thing you can pick up at Costco or Target is just get some tubs, because you're going to be draining your oil as well as your coolant for this, because when you take off the turbo and all the coolant lines, everything needs to be coming off, so there's going to be a lot of fluids everywhere. You want to get some wire brushes as well, because when you take off the intake manifold, this is a great time to start cleaning the parts of the motor that you aren't able to normally reach when everything's put together. Grab some wire brushes. You can actually break these off or get a smaller one, and then you can start scrubbing inside the intake valve to help get some of that carbon off for whatever it can reach, but I found it to be a huge help. Go pick up a couple of them just because they do break and the bristles do start to fall off, so it's nice to have backups handy. Another thing you want to get, and it's often overlooked, is a headlight lamp. You can pick one up at Target for 10-15 bucks or online if you don't already have one. That way when you're doing your carbon cleaning, you can just throw it on your forehead, turn it in, and you can actually start looking around and see what you want to see instead of having to yell at somebody like your dad did when you held the flashlight. Second to last item is pretty funny just because I couldn't figure out how to fully clean out my intake ports effectively, just because I didn't have like a vacuum or any sort of thing to blow it out. I used a bike pump with a nozzle to throw in the closed intake ports and start pumping to shoot out any debris or leftover brake cleaner that was in there when I was ready to bolt it all back together. It was pretty funny, but it actually worked. It got rid of all the extra stuff that was in there that I couldn't see that was underneath the lip side. So give that a go if you really want to try it. I found it funny, but it worked. So that's all I had. Make do with what you got. And the last thing you need is a chair and ibuprofen, because I guarantee your back's going to hurt after you're trying to do your own carbon cleaning for a while. So go pick some of those up. All right, so now we'll finally be talking about the K04 requirements. And again, you're going to be hearing some of the things that I mentioned earlier that was a requirement for the stage 1 or stage 2 files. Now you're going to kind of see how all these parts are required to get to the K04 point. So I'm going to be putting up the same stuff I mentioned earlier. Let's start with the front mount intercooler. As you can see here, the CTS Turbo one, same one I mentioned earlier, or the Evolution Raceworks one. I'll put it up right here again. I highly recommend getting the CTS Turbo one if you're more on a budget. You can find some used ones, but make sure they weren't modified, just because you could run into some fitment issues or missing hardware. But if you do get a used one, make sure you clean all the piping beforehand. You don't want any gunk or anything entering your motor that you don't even know that was there, you know? The next thing is that high pressure fuel pump I mentioned earlier. Here's that Autotech high pressure fuel pump that I use on my car. I'll throw it up on the screen. Again, the test pipe or high flow cat. Here's the CTS turbo test pipe. And then here's the high flow cat from 034 Motorsports. You can pick your poison. The test pipe will give you a little bit more sound. I don't really notice too much. I have a high flow cat and test pipe. I run the test pipe just because I like just a little bit louder exhaust note, but that's up to you. If you're more on a budget, go the test pipe route. Just again, you need to get a secondary O2 spacer and you won't pass smog. Here are some of the things that were not required for the stage 1 or stage 2 file, but specifically for the K04 itself. You need to get S3 injectors, and it's a very, very specific part number, and you have to get an OEM one. Don't buy any aftermarket ones. This part is very important, as the tuner will mention it as well. The part number needs to be exactly this one, and I'll throw the S3 injectors up on the screen right here. These are the exact ones I bought as well as every other K04 owner. People usually do the RS4 injectors as an alternative, but again, that's going to vary between tunes. I think the S3 injectors are a little bit easier to get your hands on and actually a little bit cheaper. And the S3 injectors and RS4 injectors have a different spray pattern. Take that into note. If you don't really know much about injectors, just go the S3 route. It'll be a lot easier. Now I'm going to recommend the CTS K04. I'm going to throw it up on the screen right here. Usually you can find these on a deal pretty frequently around the holidays. Eurotuning or CTS's website will have them marked off a couple $100. I recommend getting that turbo just because Geoc built their file off of it if you're going the Geoc route. I think Motoza is a little bit more fine-tuned, but they might have built it off of the CTS turbo. I'm not entirely sure. However, it seems to be the turbo to go to, and you actually have a company backing it with a warranty. The next thing you're gonna need is a boost gauge, the boost tap-in, which is one I have right here. And then also here's the boost gauge pod that I bought as well. And then here's the column mount. I actually bought the column mount just because when you're shifting gears and you're looking at your speed, you can just look down right at your column and your boost gauge is right there. It seems to be the safest thing, and your eyes and your head don't have to turn side to side to look at what your boost gauge is reading. So, and I think it's one of the more cheaper alternatives as well, with the least headache for wiring, because if you put it on your vent, you're gonna have to take out your vent and part of your dash, and you have to wire everything through, and it could turn into a little bit more of a project that you were hoping for. So you can always change it up later, but here's a good start. You're gonna need an exhaust as well. So here's the CTS turbo exhaust. You can do the ECS tuning as well, but I'll throw the CTS one on the screen right here. You're gonna wanna get a little bit better flow. The stock exhaust should be fine. However, flow might be affected. I would ask your tuner about this if you could pass on this. I'm not really gonna tell you have to, but I would ask the professionals on that. I'm not entirely sure, but if you're gonna want an exhaust, CTS turbo is a great route. ECS tuning, I think, is a similar price. You can catch these both on a deal, usually around the holidays as well with the turbo. You need to get a new N75 valve as well. This is your boost controller, essentially. It sits on the front of your turbo. Some companies will give you one along with your K04 when you buy it from their website. Usually this is a knockoff. It can or can't be. They may label it as OEM, but either way, I would just buy a new one. Better be safe than sorry, because you might run into some weird issues. I did with mine. I got one that came with my kit and it wasn't working right. I changed it out to my old one and it started working perfectly. So the last thing that's usually overlooked is the fuel pump controller. I didn't really see much about it when I was piecing together my K04, but I learned the hard way. I was driving the car, and then all of a sudden I was going up a hill and I lost all acceleration. Car was still running, idling fine, except I couldn't accelerate. So I was having a low pressure fuel pump issues. When you plug in the VCDS, if you have access to it, get the car to operating temperature and let it sit at idle. If you are seeing a reading of 50% or higher, then your low pressure fuel pump is starting to show signs of wear. Anything above 60% usually means it's going to be toast, and I wouldn't drive the car. You're going to run the super lean, and you could possibly have catastrophic failure to your engine, which would not be fun. But this Audi R8 fuel controller essentially helps lower the duty cycle on the low pressure fuel pump. And you can pick one up for like about $120, $100. I don't know, I'm gonna throw it up on the screen on FCP Euro. I've seen the price fluctuate a little bit. It's a very simple part to have. People usually do the Audi R8. People usually do the Audi RS4 fuel controller, but it's a lot more expensive. But you can get this R8 fuel controller for a fraction of the cost. This will save you from having to buy a whole new low pressure fuel pump itself, potentially. But either way, I would highly recommend grabbing this if you can. The car will still work totally fine without it. However, this is just gonna save you a headache down the road. All right, so that concludes the basic requirements for your first flash tune or stage 2 flash tune, whatever you decide to stop on, or if you continue to go up to K04 or even beyond that, you're gonna have yourself quality parts that are setting you up for success, and you're not gonna run into any issues because you bought some cheap stuff off of eBay, which is totally fine. Sometimes it really depends. I wouldn't buy an eBay turbo. eBay front mount intercooler is debatable, but expect to cut your front bumper. The reason why I recommend all these quality parts is because they are designed to fit the car properly and not have any headache along the way when installing it. Always choose quality over quantity. Do it right or do it twice, trust me. But again, thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. I should be putting out the K04 install guide pretty soon here. Just give you guys a little bit of a heads up. I'm not going to be showing you much video, I think, of me installing the K04 on my car, just more some pictures of along the process of mine so that you can get an idea of what to expect when you start to pull your car apart. But with that being said, thanks guys for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys on the next time. Peace.